choices and decisions, and control of property. And without those three, we're not free.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Very good. Thank you. So anybody else want to give it a shot? I agree with everybody so far. Anybody else want to give it a shot? Because we're trying to define liberty. Go ahead.
One thing, the right to choose, like what you're saying, but as long as your choices do not infringe on somebody else's.
Okay. Did you hear that? The right to choose as long as your choices don't infringe upon somebody else's. So this is what I believe the definition of liberty is, and it's very close to what you said. Liberty is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights. Okay? So contemplate that a little bit. I mean, burn that. If you can adopt this, and I'm going to give a little bit of credibility here because I do believe that this is the correct definition of liberty. I believe that this is the definition that our founders knew and understood to be. I believe that this is the liberty that God gives us. This is the definition of that liberty, which is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. Now, just to give it a little bit of credit here, why don't we go to someone like Thomas Paine? He's a pretty good authority, right? And he says that liberty is the power to do everything that does not interfere with the rights of others. Thus, the exercise of the natural rights of every individual has no limits save those that assure to other members of society the enjoyment of the same right. So is he not saying the very same thing, right? What about the author of the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson? He says it this way: rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. So there it is again, right? Then he adds, I do not add within the limits of the law, because law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the rights of the individual. So he's not placing the law at the top, it's the individual right? And the law is supposed to only protect that right. But that is the priority. That is the top when it comes to liberty. And so I hope that you can see that by our founders' own words, that they believed, even though this is a simpler way of saying it, they articulated it much better. But they believed that liberty is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights. And so why is it so important for us to define liberty? Why do I do this? I do this every town hall. I go through this exercise every town hall. We've had well over 200 of these since we started campaigning. And I feel it's so important that we understand the definition of liberty. But why is it so important? And let me just we're going to go through a little exercise. I hope that by the time we're done, you will see why it's so important. But one, if you don't know what the definition is, then you don't know when it's being taken, right? And you don't know who's taking it. But when we define liberty, and we go through this little exercise that we're going to go through, then, and you know that this is what it means, then you can understand when it's being taken away, and very quickly, who's taking it. So we'll get into that a little bit. So let's do this exercise. Let's apply this definition with our lives. So let's first go with the freedom to worship. So according to the definition of liberty, what would be the freedom to worship? To be able to worship whatever you want, whenever you want, as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights, right? And do you believe that? Do you believe that a person should be able to worship whatever he wants? Now, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean they're going to receive salvation. That's a whole other thing. In fact, somebody said, "Well, I should be able to worship a yellow dog if I want to." Well, I agree that right should be protected, but it's not going to bring you salvation. So don't get me confused here. But we should be willing and able and active in protecting everybody's rights to worship whatever they want as long as they're not infringing upon another person's rights. Okay? What about property? That would be the right or the freedom to do whatever you want with your property as long as you're not infringing upon your neighbor's rights. Okay? Is that liberty being taken from us? Absolutely. It's almost gone. It's almost gone. So you can see now with the proper definition of liberty, you can see how we're losing it. Right? And you can also, all of you know, anybody who owns property, know exactly who's taking it. Right? And so this is a very important exercise. And if we're going to restore and rekindle this light of freedom that we need to rekindle, we're going to have to understand what liberty is and who's taking it, and then what we need to do to fight to get it back. Right? Because we need to get back our right to control our own properties. It is extremely important that as a community we unite together to protect property. Because where else are you going to go home, and be safe, raise your families, worship? Where are you going to do that? Where are you going to be able to do the things that we need to do to be free if we can't do it on property? That's why the founders were so adamant about property being such an important element to liberty. And yet we are right now facing the reality that we don't have much liberty on our own property. So what about, this is just a small little list, but the right to travel, to be able to travel wherever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. Right to trade, I like this one because I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So this would be the freedom or the liberty to trade whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. Now it takes two people to trade, right? So you can't force somebody to trade, or you can't force someone to pay you what you want. It has to be a willing buyer and a willing seller, right? But as long as you have a willing buyer and a willing seller, we should be able to trade with whatever we want, whenever we want. We should be able to agree upon the terms and trade. And our founders believed that. They absolutely believed that freedom to trade was very important and that it should be protected. And so you can see again here the exercise of how what liberty is and when it's being taken, or how it's being taken, and who is taking it. And so I hope that you will take this little exercise here, that you'll burn it in your heart, that you'll burn it in your mind, and that it will become something that you know right off the bat. When you're talking about liberty, when you're standing up, when you're praying, when you're singing the national anthem, when you're doing these things, you know what liberty is. It's the ability to do whatever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. Or as Thomas Jefferson said, his rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. Now, just to read a sentence out of the Declaration of Independence, I think this is very important. And remember, we know who the author of the Declaration of Independence. I just barely read his definition of liberty. So there should be no question of what he means when he says liberty here. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. What does unalienable mean?
Cannot be taken away. You cannot even give it up.
Yeah, you're not supposed to be separated from them. You're not supposed to be alienated from it, right? So our Creator gave us these, and they're not to be alienated away from us. Now, then it says that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So we know what he meant when he said liberty. He meant the ability to do whatever you want as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights. Now, I do want to point out really quickly here that if you go down to your county buildings, your city buildings, your courthouses, you will meet a whole bunch of people that absolutely despise this definition. And we should be extremely, extremely concerned over that. That they do not believe that liberty is the ability to do whatever you want, as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights. That they believe that no, you have to do what they tell you to do. That you don't have that liberty. And they can't even define what liberty is. And we should be aware of that, because they will absolutely despise this definition, even when we show them that the founders clearly regretted. Now I'm gonna give comments. I'm gonna give you a chance to comment at the end. Do you have something you want to add right now? Okay, go ahead.
There's a difference between God-given rights and government-given rights. God gives us all of these rights, and they are ours. They can't be taken away from us. Anything the government gives us, they can take away. So government rights that they give are meaningless.
So rights, government can't give rights because they don't have rights themselves. They can only try to grant privileges. And the battle that, thank you very much, the battle that we are in, and the battle that my family has fought, and all the things, is these people in government, particularly, are trying to transfer our rights into privileges. So rights is another interesting thing to define. But three of them were defined in the Declaration of Independence. That's why I said among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so hopefully that was a good exercise for you. Hopefully that from now on, we'll never forget what the definition of liberty is. We'll always be able to clearly understand when it's being taken from us and clearly see who is taking it. And I hope that that will unite us as communities, as a people, to start being active in bringing back liberty into our land, bringing it back onto our properties, into our churches, into our trade. It's very important that we start to get these back, because they're almost on the verge of being lost. All right. Now, because I am running for governor, and I do want you to vote for me and support me, I'm going to give you just a little quick background about who I am. I enjoy talking about like the ranch and stuff, but it's kind of my most, I wish I could just skip over this part, but it's kind of like a little bit of a job interview that what I'm doing here. So I need to give you a little bit, and I want you to understand what makes me tick, where I came from, a little bit how I ended up here in Idaho. I've been here for almost 8 years. So I think that that's important that I do. So I was born on a ranch in southern Nevada, the Bundy Ranch. It's in the middle of the desert. Here's a picture of my parents, Cliven and Carol Bundy. I'm grateful for my parents. They're good people that taught me right from wrong. Also taught me when to compromise and when not to compromise. There is a time to compromise, right? And there's also a time not to compromise. It's very important that we know that. So here's a picture of the ranch. You can see it's pretty arid. In fact, it takes about 100 acres to produce enough feed for one cow. So you have to run cattle on a large area in order to be able to, make a living. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, starve between bites. Well, and then also the water infrastructure that my, great-great-grandfather started to build, where they captured the little springs, and they're just small springs, and they began to put them into water troughs. And then since then, my dad has created this, network of water troughs all throughout the desert there, and every single drop is very important, because these springs will only, give a stream of about the size of a pencil. But they're very consistent, and there's one spring that we call Rabbit, and it goes into a concrete water trough, and I asked my dad, I go, have you ever seen that run more or less? My dad's 77 or 78 years old. I should know that. And he said, no, I've never seen it run more, or I've never seen it run less. And in my lifetime, I'm 47 years old, I've never seen it run more or less. So there's a consistency there, even though it's in the desert. And it's made it possible for our family to run cattle on that desert. And that's why every drop is so important. And it's amazing how even though it just that small a stream, he'll have water troughs that'll be, 15 miles away. And they'll benefit. That's where the water comes from. So, here's a picture of one of the bulls. It's got looks like some horsehair on the horn. They're pretty rank. They have to be to survive. It's my little brother here, ranching cattle. And I grew up doing this. This is what I grew up doing. And you'll see the old stockade kraal around. That's some of the only kraals that hold up in the dry area. Here's a picture of my little sister. She's getting off the bus. She's met with 4 dogs and a calf. And that calf actually was, his mother was hit on the highway, and my dad did an emergency C-section and saved its life. Mother died. So we bottle fed it from the time that it, was born. And he grew up to be a really nice bull, but he was very, very, nuisance. He always wanted to be with us and thought that he was part of the family. And so he'd always, even trying to come into the house, and it just he'd go through fences. He was a big bull when he was a nuisance. My dad ended up having to get rid of him because he was such a nuisance around the. But he also would go into the field next to the house, and they would lay down at night, and the dogs would all get on top of him, and even the sheep would all get in one big pile. And we would just say, hey, they're having an identity crisis. Much like the people in Boise right now. When I was about 15 years old, my dad came to me and said that the ranch wasn't big enough for the both of us. And it wasn't because, we couldn't get along. It was basically because I had a bunch of siblings. I had 4 older brothers, or have 4 older brothers. And the ranch was not going to produce enough living for all of my dad's children. And he was trying to be upfront and open and say, look, you're kind of in the middle, and most likely, you're not going to be able to, raise your family on this ranch. And I hated that idea, but I realized that, that was a good thing, and I had to, leave the ranch and go make a living another way. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But before I did that, I did serve a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I served in Minnesota 2 years. And it was quite it was a refinement for me. Because here I am coming off the ranch and all the, the rough and tough of the ranch and all the freedom and everything. And then I'm putting a white shirt and tie and a suit in Minnesota. And I'm knocking on doors and talking to people about Jesus Christ. And, I learned how to write and I learned how to talk there. And I learned a lot of things. It was a great refinement. But more than anything, what I learned and what I took home was my commitment to the Lord. That whatever I did, I was going to do for the Lord. Like I was going to, I had to balance that. I had to go to Him, and I had to feel that it was what He wanted me to do. And I'm so grateful for that time because it set me down and said, hey, look, this is what's most important. This is what you're supposed to do. So after that, I decided to get a little more educated, and I went to Southern Utah University in Cedar City, Utah. And I actually started a little business. I thought that I was going to be able to have the business, go to school, and I was in business management as my degree. And I thought that the business would put me through school, and that it would also help me educate, and it'd be this great thing. Well, it didn't happen that way. My business took way too much time, and I ended up having to make a decision whether I was going to keep going to school or I was going to do business. And I decided, well, it doesn't make much sense to go to school to do business when I have a business that's functioning and I'm learning, so I just went into business. But I was in Cedar City, and my business wasn't really, I was in the commercial fleet maintenance business where I was basically managing and maintaining commercial truck. And I was in Cedar City wondering why I was there. I kept, year after year, going, why am I here? I should go to like somewhere else where there's a lot more trucks. But I felt like I was supposed to stay there, and it was one of those things, again, like, until I felt like it was right, I wasn't going to make that move. And I found out after a few years the reason why I was supposed to stay in Cedar City. And I met my wife, and Lisa. We got married on July 27, 2001. And then just a few months after that, we moved to Arizona. And I took my business down there and we began to build a life down in Arizona, just south of Phoenix there. And we have 6 children, 3 boys, 3 girls. And, I ended up building one of the largest fleet maintenance private fleet maintenance business in Arizona. I hired hundreds of people, dealt with millions of dollars in budgets, and had to do all the hard things because I just started it from scratch, so I had to build it all up and build all the policies and procedures and all the things that go on in trying to, create a business that runs smooth and that is productive and that is a good place to work and all of those things. And I tell you that because I want you to know that I have kind of another side to me, if you will. I have an entrepreneur side to me. I have a business, a CEO side to me. And I've had to do a lot of communicating with people and building teams and getting people to go in certain directions and helping that along. And I think that those are skills that I have been able to develop that will be very beneficial as a governor. Now, when we were in business about 16, 17 years, I could see that the fleet maintenance industry was just simply lacking technology. And it really needed it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I couldn't find it. It just wasn't there. And so my dad always said, well, if you can't find a job, then you make a job. We live in the United States of America, right? Well, I in this case, I couldn't find what I needed, so I decided we were going to make it. And I put a team together, and it took us several years, and we developed this software and tested it in the shop and among my customers and my technicians and everybody. And we got it working so well that I began to sell it to other shops. And now it's one of the leading fleet maintenance shop management softwares in North America. So again, a little bit more about, I started that one from scratch and built it up. So at this time, life was pretty good. It was really, really good. It was the first time that I had both time and money. And as you know, you usually have time and no money, or you have money and no time. And so, or you're running a campaign, you have neither. But that's where I was at. I was, in a good position with my family and with business, and I was thinking that I really had things figured out. And then in 2014, many of you may know what happened to my family. Happened to my father's ranch. And ultimately, to make a very, very long story short, they sent 213 armed federal agents and surrounded my family's ranch, and basically looked like it was going to be another Waco or Ruby Ridge type of situation. And that was very much the threat that was upon my family. They began to kill the cattle from the helicopters, burying them in mass graves, killed around 60 head of cattle, destroying the water infrastructure that was in there. Some of it's over 100 years old. Began to destroy the corrals and fences and so forth. Meanwhile, they said if we resisted in any way that it would be a Waco or Ruby Ridge. And we didn't know what to do. And so all we could do is pray and ultimately end up calling upon people, the American people, and exposing what was happening through social media and so forth. And what happened was the American people came. They came by the thousands. And again, a very long story. They came by the thousands and ultimately gave these federal agents an ultimatum that they needed to leave. And they needed to leave immediately. And I watched something transpire that was amazing. This is the rear view mirror of one of the federal vehicles. And this is only about a third of the way through, because if you can position yourself, he's driving forward, and this convoy of vehicles goes all the way up to the freeway that you can see. And they left because the American people demanded that they leave. And it changed my life forever. Thank you. Yeah. So it changed me, because I had experienced something that I never thought was possible. Two major things that I never thought was possible. One was I had no idea that our government was such a terrible situation. All of us now are starting to see it, but this was 8 years ago. We saw it back then. And my father understood it even a lot better than I did. But so I saw that. I saw this great threat. I never would have believed that it would happen. It was like a scene out of the Hollywood movie Red Dawn. That's what our little valley was like. And it was all over them trying to make our ranch a mitigation area for the desert tortoise. It was all an extreme environmentalist movement. That's what it was all over. Now, then I said that was one part of it. But the other part was I saw the solution. I actually experienced what the remedy for this is. And that's the American people coming together and saying, no, you're not going to do this. This man has rights, or we have rights, and you're not going to take them away. So I saw it all in 1 week, and it was really a very interesting experience, and I'll never be the same. And I need you to know that. I'm never going to be the same. And this will always burn in me and always be a great example of what is happening in this country, and also what we must do, what the remedy is. Now, shortly after that, I moved to Idaho in 2015. This was taken in 2021. That's my family. And my oldest daughter, she doesn't look like she's the oldest, but she's right here now. She's 20. She's been married for a little over a year now, and she's expecting. And this Saturday, we're going to find out whether it's a boy or a girl. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you were ever aware of this, but you were referred to as America's Tiananmen.
America's what?
Tiananmen Square.
Well, it was a pretty amazing thing that happened. Right after I moved to Idaho, because I was kind of a little bit like wanting to get, out of the limelight. I mean, my family was thrown into this media frenzy that, we never asked for that. We didn't want it. And so I was kind of like, I'm going to get to Idaho. I'm going to get among a people that I think understands liberty, and I'm going to, kind of slow down and take care of my family like I want to. And then I found out about the Hammond family just a couple hours away from my home that I bought in Idaho. And this very same thing was happening to them. In fact, it was even worse. They were trying to put them in prison. And ultimately, we brought so much attention to the situation. It wasn't easy. I spent 2 years in federal prison, never convicted of any crime. Half of that time was in solitary confinement, right along with my brothers and my father and friends. But ultimately what it did is it brought so much attention to the Hammond family's plight that President Trump pardoned them. And they went home to their families. And President Trump only pardoned 17 people, and 3 of those people I advocated for. So, and I'm very grateful for President Trump for doing that. Now, I want to spend the rest of the time, because that's what we're here for, talking about Idaho. And I'm going to show you some information here that I think that you need to know, and I think is very important for people to understand. Because you have a very important decision to make, and that is who's going to be your next governor. Because Idaho is in a battle for its conservative soul. It absolutely isn't a battle for its conservative soul. And many states just all around us have lost that battle that once were very conservative and now are being controlled by a liberal agenda. And part of the reason, which is not anything that anybody can do or not do about really, but part of the reason is that Idaho is the fastest growing state in the United States. In fact, since 2015, approximately 248,000 people have moved to Idaho. Now imagine adding the city the size of Boise to your state every 10 years, because that's what's happening right now in Idaho. And so that, talk about a challenge, right? That's just a challenge in itself. Now, but to make matters worse, approximately 36% of the people coming to Idaho are liberal-minded, and they want desperately to change Idaho and all our conservative values and the things that we love so much. They want desperately to change it into a more progressively woke place to live. And they're very active in doing that. Much more active than you and I are. Well, much more active than most Idahoans are. So we have to be aware of this, that there's a battle going on, and that there's an enemy that's 3 times, if you statistically look at the way they vote, they're 3 times more active than the conservatives in Idaho. And statistically, if we continue with the growth and with their activities and our inaction, that statistically in less than 5 years they will control the Idaho elections. And that's the reality. So we must wake up. We must become active. Because if we do not act, we will become a people that are acted upon. And that's our choice. Either act or we will be acted upon. That's pretty much life. Now, with the Republican Party members controlling the Senate, House, and Governor's office for the past 26 years, you would think that Idaho would be the most conservative state in the United States. But it's not. They're not putting forth the Republican platform. The Republican platform is a righteous, good platform of minimal government, fiscal responsibility in government, limited, but a small government, protecting the unborn. All of these are, securing individual freedoms. This is all part of the Republican platform, yet those who have been in control for literally almost the last 40 years are not putting forth this. And we're facing things like this going on in Idaho. In fact, if you go downtown to the Capitol building, often you will see on all the light poles rainbow flags hanging from the city and state flag poles and light poles, paid for by the city and paid for by the state, by the taxpayers' dollars. And we have to ask the question, how did we get here? How did we get here? Go downtown Boise and see what's happening to the homeless. See what's happening with the homeless, I should say. And if we do not watch ourselves, we do not change our course, Boise will be the next Portland, and Idaho will be the new Oregon. And we have to, again, ask why. How did we get here? Well, I want to present a few things that may shine a little bit of light on this. And in particular, I'm going to talk about this guy right here. So, did you know that Governor Little, when he was a senator, so clear back in the 2000s, early 2000s actually, that he was the only state representative in Idaho to support gay marriage? Clear back then. And now, as governor, under Governor Little's quote-unquote leadership, Idaho has increased its food stamps program by 24.2%, the highest of any other state in the United States, the highest increase. He's also pumping millions of dollars into government-free housing. He just dumped another $50 million into government-free housing here in Idaho. If you remember, Governor Little was supportive of Otter when they pushed Obamacare and Medicaid expansion. Do you remember that in Idaho? And he was a staunch supporter of that. And so why are these things important for me to tell you? Why is it important for you to know? Well, if we break this down, state housing, government welfare, free food, free healthcare programs, and pushing the gay ideology has been the staple of the leftist agenda for decades, right? If we were to bullet point what the leftist agenda is, what the socialist, communist agenda is, it's free housing, or government housing, free food, free healthcare, free education, and pushing the gay ideology. And no person has pushed that more in Idaho than Governor Brad Little. And so it's no wonder Idaho is in a fatal battle for its conservative soul, because we've been going down election after election, going down and voting these people in. Yeah. That's what we've been doing, and we have not been aware of who they are and what they're doing. And so they've been able to get away with this, knowing that the people of Idaho are just taking care of their families, working in their communities, and then when it comes time on election day, they go down and they just vote R, and then they put a sticker on their shirt that says, I voted. And that's what's been going on, and they believe that will continue to go on, so they can keep pushing the agenda that they truly believe in, rather than the agenda that we believe they believe in. And we have to break this cycle, or Idaho will be the new Oregon. Let's just make a list. Anybody from Oregon here? You can raise your hand, okay? Okay, I won't ask if you're from California, okay? No, you're welcome. As long as you're conservative, we love that you're here. As long as you love God and want to work, and we're grateful you're here. So, shake your head, yes or no, if Oregon was once an ultra-conservative state. He's saying yes, it was. Washington was an ultra-conservative state. California was an ultra-conservative state. Yeah. Nevada was an ultra-conservative state. New Mexico. Recently, Colorado, right? All of these states lost this battle. And the conservatives in Colorado now looking, going around, what just happened to our state? Because they were doing the exact same thing that we're doing here. And they're not being aware of who they're putting in office, and those people, even though they say they're Republican, are pushing a leftist agenda that isn't contrary to the very definition of liberty. And so, again, no wonder we're in a fatal battle for our conservative soul. Now, if this was the only thing that, I had to show you, I think we could rally and we can, hopefully get things straightened out here. But Idaho is not only the fastest growing state in the United States, with the most increase of welfare programs of any other state. But during Brad Little's reign, Idaho was the first in a few more things. Idaho was the first state to arrest pastors for holding church services outside. Now, I've showed this. I've showed this many times, and I have never got used to seeing these things happen. This is a pastor, and they're taking the Bible out of his hands in Idaho so they can put handcuffs on him. I cannot get used to this. We must not allow this to happen. If we just go to the United States Constitution here and go to the First Amendment. If you recall, the states would not ratify the Constitution until they added a Bill of Rights, because they were afraid that they were going to create a government that was going to do the same thing that they just fought against. And so they're like, we need to add, a Bill of Rights. And it was so important to them that they got it done, and then they began to ratify the Constitution. And the very first line of the very first amendment, or the very first Bill of Rights, reads this: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Wow. So that was most important to them. And yet in Idaho, we have violated that. Now, if there was any question that somehow the 10th Amendment overrode the First Amendment, which we know is not the case, but just in case, if we thought that somehow the Idaho Constitution might say something different, I'm gonna read you what the Idaho Constitution says. And it's also on the first page, Article 1, Section 4, is titled Guarantee of Religious Liberties. The exercise and enjoyment of religious faith and worship shall forever be guaranteed, and no person shall be denied any civil or political right, privilege, or capacity on account of his religious opinions. And if there's still a question, then you go to the back of the Idaho Constitution to Section 19. And it's titled Religious Freedoms Guaranteed. And listen to these words, because they're beautiful words. It is ordained by the state of Idaho that perfect toleration of religious sentiment shall be secured, and no inhabitant of said state, that would be Idaho, said state, shall ever be molested in person or property on account of his or her mode of religious worship. So there's no doubt, it's so clear that our law, our supreme laws in both the U.S. and state constitution protect the right to worship. Yet I sadly stand here today and tell you that Idaho was the first state to violate that, at least during the COVID garbage. And it saddens me, but it also should wake us up. It should wake us up and say, look, we're not in this little protective bubble that we think we're in. Idaho was the first state to arrest pastors for having church outside. Idaho was also the first state to arrest a mother for taking her children to the park. Right? What's that? I mean Idaho. We voted him in. Okay? Well, we have this process where the majority rules in our elections. And we put him in, and he represents us as the executive of the state of Idaho. And I get what you're saying, but this happened. And we didn't expect this from Brad Little. I mean, there's probably a lot of you in here that voted for Brad Little. We didn't expect this from him. And I'm here trying to show you what he's done so that we won't make the same mistake. Idaho was also one of the first states to begin raiding businesses for not shutting down during the COVID lockdowns. Began prosecuting owners. So why was this going on? What was happening? Why did they do this? Well, they did it because this man ordered them to. Yeah, he did. I'm gonna get into that, absolutely. But this is his order. Tell me if you're okay with this order. This order directs all individuals living in the state of Idaho to self-isolate at their place of residence. So he's telling you that you can't come out of your home unless you get permission from him. Are you okay with that? No. We never gave him that authority. He doesn't have that authority. But he ordered us. And if you get down here to 4 here, it said prohibiting all non-essential gatherings of any number of individuals. This included church, evidently, because that's why officers in Idaho were arresting pastors, because they were having unauthorized gatherings in Idaho, even though it's clearly protected. Both the right to assemble and the right to worship is protected in our constitutions. But it was going on. And this is the 9th page of the stay-home order, the lockdown order. And line 9 it says, the director requests that the sheriff and chiefs of police in the state of Idaho and the Idaho State Police ensure compliance with and enforce this order. The violation of any provision of this order constitutes an imminent threat to public health. This was not an order of suggestion, this was an order of enforcement. And it was given to us by this man, and the greatest violations that have actually happened in this country since the ratification of the U.S. Constitution happened right here in Idaho. Now, let's try to give Governor a little slack here, okay? That's how it all starts, yeah. Give him a little slack, right? Okay, so let's just, then hypothetically, let's say that he was just kind of ignorant to what's going on, the Constitution and so forth, and he was just doing it because of the health and safety of the people of Idaho. Okay? Well, I don't agree with that either, but I want to try to at least, there may be a lot of you here that think that he did do it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. Well, I want to present some things to you. Because if you remember, on March 13th, 2020, is when Governor Little put the state of Idaho in a state of emergency. Okay? It's actually an official state of emergency. He put us in it through a declaration emergency, executive power. At least that's what he was claiming. Well, remember March 13th because I'm going to show you some things here that I think are important. I think they're called evidence, but what's the opposite of evidence? Anybody? What's that? A lie? Like propaganda, right? A lie, propaganda, okay? So you get to decide whether what I'm going to show you is evidence or propaganda. You get to decide that. And I can't make that decision for you. You have to decide. But on March 13th, 2020, the same day that he put the state of Idaho in a state of emergency, it was the same day that President Trump announced that he was releasing $50 billion to states that were in a state of emergency. Okay? Now you might be saying, well, maybe Idaho really was. This is just a coincidence. Maybe Idaho really was. But the problem is, if you look on the governor's own website on March 13th, 2020, he says that there was only one confirmed COVID case. One case of 1.8 million people, a little over, right, in Idaho. We have one case of something, and he puts the state of Idaho in a state of emergency. And it happened to be the same day that $50 billion becomes available to states, so we're in a state of emergency, right? Now, if you remember, about a week and a half later, he put the state of Idaho in an extreme state of emergency. You remember that? That was on March 25th, 2020. Well, it happened to be that that was the same day that President Trump and Nancy Pelosi announced a $2 trillion federal relief packages to states that were in an extreme state of emergency. See the date right there, March 25th, 2020? Idaho had 136 unconfirmed COVID cases and no deaths, no nothing. And he put us in extreme state of emergency. Well, if you start going to his own documents, his own proclamations, his own executive orders, you see what he's doing here. It's very clear. Right here he's talking about securing millions of dollars in funds. Right down here he references the authority that he's doing it under. 46601. I want you to put that in the back of your mind there. Remember 46601 because he's saying I'm doing this with the authority of section 46601. Right here he's thanking President Trump for $1.25 billion and he's looking for more. This is a very interesting executive order, 2020-07. I believe that this was the 7th order in 2020. I think that's how it works. And let's look at this. So this is Brad Little, and he's saying, whereas I issued a proclamation on March 13, 2020, declaring a state of emergency. Whereas I issued a proclamation on March 25, 2020, declaring a state of extreme emergency in the state of Idaho. Whereas Congress has passed and President Trump has signed 3 legislative packages that provide state funding in response to COVID-19. So there we're getting it, right? Whereas I anticipate additional congressional actions on federal relief packages to states regarding COVID-19. Now, so the money's coming and there's more money coming and, you know, because I declared these emergencies, they're become available to us. Now, therefore, I, Brad Little, Governor of the state of Idaho, do hereby order the creation of a COVID-19 Financial Advisory Committee comprised of members appointed by and serving at the pleasure of the governor. So what's he doing here? He's getting all this money from the federal government, and he's going to create a little committee of people that he selects, him and his buddies, right, that serve at his pleasure. And then the last page says, for the coronavirus relief funds and other funds to be administered by the office of the governor. So they are going to decide where all this money goes themselves. Now, how is the funds of the state supposed to be administered? Who's supposed to administer them? Yeah, the legislature, right? So he completely is bypassing the legislature. And he's created this committee himself. He's got all this money coming, and they're going to decide where it goes. Why is it important that the legislature does it and not a small group of people that are all buddies that serve at the pleasure of one man? They represent the people. They are the people, right? And we send them up there to represent us, and they all argue and debate and go back and forth, and it's a big open thing where all of us can watch, and pretty soon they decide where the money goes, right? And it's all open, and then it's all where we can see it, and it's out in the open, and it's a whole bunch of them, so they can't, get control of it and use it to keep themselves in power, or to line their buddies' pockets, or to do something that to buy people's votes and stay in power, right? Or just misuse it. That's the process. That's why the Constitution says that the legislature is supposed to administer the funds of the state. Yet we have right here Governor Little creating a committee and doing just opposite of what the our founders and our Constitution says when it comes to administering the funds. And he bypassed the legislature. Now, anybody have any idea how much money we're talking about here? Okay, that we know of, $18.7 billion. That's over 2 times the annual state budget. Over 2 times the annual state budget. 18.7. We believe that there's more, but we can't verify it, but we can verify the 18.7.
So is that, has he distributed out to all the rhinos? Is that how come we're having a hard time getting them out?
So she asked, has he distributed it out to? Well, we know that he pumped it into a ton of the bureaucracies of the state. And now our state government is bigger and more funded and more intrusive than we've ever seen before, ever. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but one of the real problems is we can't see where it's going. We can't see where it's went. Yeah, there's like big chunks that we can see, but we don't know like what that's gone to. So now, if you remember I said the authority. I showed where he said the authority that he was doing this under. Well, I want to show you that it was. 46601. I mean, I've said that hundreds of times. I couldn't remember right then. So they should be. Yeah, so she's confused that Governor Little has done this and got away with it, right? I am too. Now, just so you know, the county, or not the state controller has, in much detail, broken down the $1.25 billion that he got. But the rest of it's not broken down. So, but this is why we don't do it this way. The governor is not supposed to administer the funds of the state. It's supposed to be the legislature, not the governor. We have all these problems because of this, right? So remember the authority I said, 46601, that he said he's acting under, the power he's acting under? Well, I want to show you this. Title 46, Militia and Military Affairs, Chapter 6, Martial Law and Active Duty, 46601, Authority of the Governor. So what did he put the people of Idaho under? Martial law. That's a factual thing. It's not a hyperbole. It's not something that I'm saying to excite. He put us under martial law, and he held us there for over 740 days. Now look at here. This is interesting. Section 2 here. During a period of a state of extreme emergency. Remember, he created the extreme emergency. He did it himself. He just said the state is in extreme emergency. Normally, extreme emergency is something that's coming on us, a flood or a disaster or an invasion or something like that that's come upon us, and then they're like, oh, this is an extreme emergency, and so therefore we have to act quickly. But no, he just declared that Idaho was in a state of extreme emergency when we had one confirmed COVID case, right? Now, so he created that. It says, during a period of state of extreme emergency, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise all police power vested in the state. Let me read that again. During a period of state of extreme emergency that he created, the governor, him, shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise all police power vested in the state. What do we call that? That's right. That's why he said the legislature didn't have permission to convene. He took power over it, right? So what do we call this? A police state, a tyrant. Did you know that our founder's definition of tyranny was when all three powers of government are put under one body? So this is the very definition of tyranny. But what form of government is this? It's a dictatorship, right? We need to understand that what he did here. So now he consolidated all the funds, right? All the money that he needed over 2 times the annual state budget. And then he consolidated all the power, and he consolidated all under his power. Remember how they said appointed by and serving at the pleasure of the governor? So now he has all this money, and then he consolidated all the powers of the Idaho government under one body, him.
Did he have the right to declare a state of emergency, or does that have to go through legislation?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think one we need to answer. If this code is something that we really want, constitutionally, he doesn't have that authority. I can tell you that. Yeah, but he did. And this is Idaho code that's never been used before, and Governor Little used it when he declared his own extreme state of emergency. Now, remember, we're answering the question whether he did it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho, or whether he did it for something else. Now, I think his words are the best words, the best evidence, right? And on March 8, 2022, he did a press release, and he made certain comments, and I think that they're telling, and I want to show you these. He said, the emergency declaration, so all the emergency things that he did, the martial law, all the things he did, the emergency declaration served as an administrative function to recoup FEMA dollars for a variety of needs throughout Idaho. So he tells us he didn't do it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. He did it as a function to recoup federal dollars for a variety of needs or pet projects that he wanted to accomplish throughout Idaho. And he put you and I in literal terror. He had pastors arrested, mothers arrested, thousands of businesses were put out of business. Many will never reopen their doors again. And he did it for federal money so that he and his buddies can do the little projects in Idaho that they want to do and they've been wanting to do. Now he goes on to say, without the emergency declaration, we would not be able to provide historic tax relief. A step that really helps me buy votes. Oh no, that's not what he says. So a step, this is comical. It's even more comical than what I just, made up. A step that's even more important now as gas prices and inflation soar. Well, what do you think caused the inflation? It's the states taking billions of dollars from the federal government. Right? If we were to think this way in our own finances, most of us wouldn't be able to buy gas just to get here. Then he goes on, without the emergency declaration, Idaho would not be the state with the strongest economy in the nation. Is this not an insult to the people of Idaho? So he's not saying that the Idaho is in such an economic prosperity and the people are generating so much wealth and all that we have this great economy. He's saying that the reason why we have this economy is because we took so much money from the federal government. Right? It goes on, without the emergency declaration, the state of Idaho would not be able to provide Idahoans with historic tax relief. Again, it's not because we have all this money, because we've generated it. It's because he got so much money from the federal government. Now he's going to give you a little bit back right before the primaries and also right before the general election. Right? Okay. See, some people always watch it. You're like one of the smartest guys in this room, I'll tell you that. No, I'll tell you. But hold that thought, because I'm going to get into it, okay? Because he's read some things in here that are very important that we talk about. But I don't want to get to it quite yet, okay? I love when people do that. Because I have something else I want to show you. Anybody receive this letter in the mail or in the email? It came with a check right before the Republican primaries. Came from Brad Little, right? And it says here, there's a couple things I really need to point out. It says, the economy of Idaho continues to blow past projections, and we are leading the country in economic prosperity. But he told us why. It's not because the economy of Idaho is great, it's because they receive so much federal money. Then he says, we achieved historic tax relief for Idahoans, meaning we achieved it. Yeah, we took billions of dollars from the federal government. We achieved historic tax relief for Idahoans for a second year in a row. We are returning your tax dollars with our record budget surplus. It's all a false thing. But the point I want to point out here, it says, we achieved historic tax relief for Idahoans a second year in a row. Now, if you look, this was issued in 2020. It was right around February, right before the primaries. And so what 2 years is he talking about? 2020 and 2021. So he's saying that somehow during the dark months of the pandemic, when the economy was shut down, when no one was going to work, when, businesses were completely shut down, schools were shut down, people were afraid to travel, he's saying that somehow during those 2 years that that Idaho had the best 2 financial years ever. That we amassed a record budget surplus during those 2 years. A second year in a row. Right? I mean, how ridiculous is that? And in fact, the Hill, you'll see here, it says right down here, it says the impact of the pandemic on the U.S. and global economy was catastrophic. Economic historian Adam Tooze characterized its impact as being the swiftest and most comprehensive contraction of global economic activity ever. And yet, during that same period of time, Brad Little says that Idaho is the best financial situation ever. We have so much money that we're going to give a little bit of it back to you right before the primaries, and then a little bit back to you right before the general elections. And he's touting that Idaho is leading the nation in economic prosperity. He's also saying that it's the least regulated state, right? Yet thousands of businesses were shut down, never to reopen because of him. We're being lied to. We are being lied to. He had nothing left. Felt life was too hard to go on. Now, back to what you said, because that you saw, because this ain't the worst of it. Because now he's saying in his own statements that I kept Idaho open. Banned vaccines passports, never issued mandates for vaccines or masks. He says the emergency declaration never violated or restricted any rights of Idahoans, never put Idaho on lockdown, and never allowed for mandates for masks or vaccines. These are the facts. I don't know what Idaho he lived in. I mean, I don't know, maybe he was over there, you know, visiting Governor Inslee and Governor Brown, Governor Newsom, but I lived in a completely different world. I mean, he locked down Idaho. And if he didn't, then why were pastors being arrested? Why were mothers being arrested? You know, let me show you something here. You know, why were business owners being raided and prosecuted? I'm going to show you something here. I'm going to show you a little video. And you tell me how Governor Little is saying what he's saying.
My name is Sarah Grady, and I was arrested April 21st of 2020 for taking my kids to a playground. I took my kids to Kleiner Park for a play date, and a few minutes later, 3 officers showed up and started kicking kids and parents off the playground. My children did see me arrested. You would never think, I never thought that day, taking my kids to a playground, that it would lead to me 2.5 years later, fighting the state of Idaho, 2 trials suspended, $26,000, 4 lawyers. I just can't believe it's happening in America, let alone Idaho, a state that should be the most conservative state in the nation. It's a disgrace. Still to this day, my kids will ask, sometimes when we go to a playground, Mom, are you going to get arrested today? The playground was shut down because of Brad Little's stay-at-home order. Brad Little has done nothing. He's been silent on it. There was a person I know a few weeks ago that asked him if he could help me, and he essentially said he wouldn't. I was labeled non-essential. How can a mother be labeled non-essential? Especially, I mean, we give birth to taxpayers. How is that even possible? I don't know how any citizen of Idaho who could actually put their name behind Brad Little, especially if they were labeled non-essential. I think Brad Little is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Everybody thinks because he has an R behind his name that he is for the Republican platform. That's just really not true. I mean, look what he did during the stay-at-home order. He was essentially doing the same thing that other Democrat governors were doing. Brad Little is not conservative. Brad Little is not for the people. Brad Little should not be governor. It's time for Brad Little to go. I think Idaho needs a governor who actually cares about the people and definitely cares about mothers who take their kids to playgrounds. So for this election, I'll be supporting the obvious choice, the obvious conservative choice for a governor, Ammon Bundy.
Thank you. So again, I'm not sure how in any way our current governor could claim that he kept Idaho open. So, and I just want to, last piece of evidence, again, show you this, that the sheriffs and chiefs of police in the state of Idaho and Idaho State Police ensure compliance with and enforce this order. The violation of any provision of this order constitutes an imminent threat to public health. This was not an order of suggestion, this was an order of enforcement. Now, I could show you many other things that he did when he took all these powers to himself, including suspending parental rights when the state takes your child. And those things are very, very concerning. But I don't have time, and I want to answer your questions. So we're going to go into questions now, and hopefully we just have a good conversation. And then I want to show you a few videos here at the very end and have a little fun, because my campaign has been, creating videos and trying to communicate with people all across the state of what's happening, what's important. So, any questions that you have for me? Right here. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, there we go.
Okay. So just like our presidential election, as well as, the California election, all this hype of like Larry Elder going around campaigning for a long, long time, and you never see any sort of action from Gavin Newsom or even Brad Little. I've yet to see any sort of campaigning signs. I've seen one sign in Boise. I've seen only one sign in Twin Falls in my time around here. And yet, the same stuff happened with Gavin Newsom, where all of a sudden, oh, thank you for supporting me, and the next morning it's over and everyone's quiet. Let's go home. So I guess my question is if real authentication that this guy is either cheated or if there's miraculously he just ends up winning for, what's the follow-up?
Well, so we did a lot of polling before the Republican primaries. And, well, first of all, you know, when it comes to election integrity, I just want to let you know that I've talked to the Secretary of State and he says everything's okay. Okay? So, but with that, thank you. But with that, as a side note, we did run really good polls, my campaign in the primaries. And what exactly we thought was going to happen did happen. And how do we do that? We reach out to the people and we ask them questions and we find out what they're thinking. And then you do that enough and you tally and you think, well, that's probably what the rest of Idaho is going to do, right? And it was exactly what we thought. And so in that case, I'm like, look, the primaries were accurate, or the polls in the primaries were accurate. It went through and it happened. And so then I have to say, well, what really happened? Well, what happened is we went down to the voting booth and we voted R, no matter what. That's what we did. And that's what they rely on. You know, the Democrats in California, they rely on everybody going down there and voting D. And so the incumbent or those in power, they don't even really care. They don't need to campaign. And in fact, when Governor Little wouldn't debate me, I don't know if you know that, but he wouldn't debate, and 2 statewide debates with Idaho Public Television and KTVB, he refused to debate me. When he was asked, his office was asked why, they said, well, Governor Little is so popular he doesn't need to debate. And the reality is, though, is he probably is. He's got enough money behind him, yeah. But he hasn't even used the money, though, Shane. He had a $5 million war chest, and he hasn't even used it because he just thinks, well, I don't need to. And so until we show him, and I believe that we have that possibility to do that in this election right now. And we're seeing it. You're seeing it all over the country. You know, there was a truck driver that beat the incumbent on a major race in one of the eastern states, and he only spent $5,000 on his race. And she spent like, what, 100 and something? I mean, I'm throwing out numbers there. You have to fact check me. But it was, you know, that's what's going on. And so, because people are waking up. So I don't know if that's a great answer, but that is my answer. I mean, they really believe that they don't have to. So, right here. Oh, right here, and then back here.
Okay. Hello, my name is George, and I just want to give a praise that I saw you on Timcast IRL, where you were there for 2 hours, and I love the fact that Tim gave you, I knew about your history because you were given the chance to totally explain what happened.
Uh-huh.
And that's all I just wanted to say.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was fun. It was fun to go there. What's that? Yeah, lady in the red.
Hi, my name is Joan. I'm asking this for a friend, I guess. I'm very politically active, and people come to me and say who to vote, ask who to vote for, and I tell them I'm supporting you, and I always get asked the question, well, Ammon Bundy will just split the vote, so we'll end up with the Democrat. Will you please address that?
Yeah. So, of course, that's what they want you to believe, right? But so these are the facts. I'll break them down. So we have, in Idaho, we have about 588,000 registered Republicans, okay? The largest voting bloc in Idaho, 588,000. And then we have about 310,000 unaffiliated voters, the next largest voting bloc. So they don't want to be part of any party. At least that's kind of what it appears. And then we have 136,000 registered Democrats, okay? And some of them will hang out in the unaffiliated category and so forth, but it is statistic. And then we have a whole bunch of move-ins that we need to check the numbers that have just recently registered. And so I need to get in there and see that increase. And 64% of them are conservative and have fled from other states, you know, for conservative. So these are the major voting blocks in Idaho. And if you break those down, it is statistically impossible for the Democrats to win a statewide race. It is right now. And so, especially, does anybody know who the Democrat nominee is? Have you? I was hoping someone would say that. That's awesome. Okay. Besides Brad Little, have you seen one sign from the Democrat nominee? Have you seen one ad, one, you know, no. Yeah. And in fact, someone told me just yesterday seemed like it was 5 days packed into one, but yesterday, who she claims that she's up on it, that she went to the Secretary of State, and that the Democrat nominee has had less than 50 donations to his campaign. So he's not even trying. They're not even trying. So this idea that somehow they're going to split the vote is absolutely false. It's completely false, and the only one that wants you to believe that is the establishment Republicans. So, and just kind of give you a little bit of an idea. So we know the Republican Party base is split, right around 50-50. Nearly 50% of Republicans did not vote for Brad Little in the primary. They voted not only didn't vote for him, they voted against him. And we believe that we will get a tremendous amount of support. We know that. We know that. The majority of you in here are Republicans, and I hope to get your support. We know that we're going to do very, very well in among the Republican base because they're tired of what's going on. And then we're going to add a huge amount of the unaffiliated voters, and we're going to do very well with the new move-ins. And of course, the Constitutional and Libertarian Party, we're going to do well there too. And we only have to reach about 310,000 people, and we've won this race. So it's anybody's taking. We believe we can win this race. We do believe we can win it. All right. So right here and then right here. Right back here, plaid shirt.
I got here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go right here and then we'll go here. You did raise your hand. Thank you.
Well, I've lived in Idaho 51 years. We run the whole state on less than $200 million when I came here. You can check that out. And our taxes are just going bonkers. And all this lies about tax rebates and saving taxes and less regulations. He's totally a dictator. I contacted his office by emails and phone calls, and how many replies did I get to any of that? And my friends say the same thing, 0. And the biggest thing that he has done is caused a lot of kids that were locked down. The suicide rate among the teens nationwide has gone up over 50%, and that's true in Idaho too, and that's a statistic they're hiding about us. He needs to go, and we really need to support Ammon Bundy because he is a total dictator. He has violated especially our Bill of Rights, and he don't care. That's the problem.
Yeah. So, when you were talking about finances at the beginning of right back here, and then over on this side right there. I want to show you something. So this is where how the money comes into the state of Idaho. If you look, 36.4% of our budget comes from the federal government. Okay, that's a big problem. You and I both know. But then look at this. Almost 40% of our expenses goes to welfare programs. $3.7 billion last year to welfare programs. I mean, this is what's going on in Idaho. We have a problem. We have a problem. Okay, go ahead.
I've had some uninformed individuals tell me that you're too radical, how would you respond to that?
Well, I hate to deny a good thing. There's a lot of ways, I could say, well, hey, look at my family, look at my life, look at what I've done, and, if that's radical, then I don't know, But I could also say that, we've got to do something. We've got to do something. We are facing the reality of liberty being completely lost in the world. And Idaho is one of the last holdouts. Idaho has I believe, and statistically I believe I can prove this, that Idaho has the largest concentration of people who believe in liberty anywhere in the world. And if we're not going to do anything about it, then who is? And I will not live without liberty. I won't live without it. It was taken from me already. I spent 2 years in federal prison and was never even convicted of even one little crime. Not one misdemeanor, nothing. And half that time I spent in solitary confinement. Never once was I able to have any physical contact with my wife or children the entire time.
I'm retired law enforcement. How is this not absolutely broadcasted everywhere that you went through this and you were incarcerated, you were never formally prosecuted?
Yeah, so yes, how does this story, how isn't it broadcasted everywhere? Well, everybody heard about the story when they arrested me, but no one heard that we beat them 2 times in federal court, that the federal government spent $100 million trying to prosecute my family. And we beat him because the hand of God was involved in it, and he said, you're not going to do this to this family. But the media...
I'll give you a real easy answer. Radical times, and we're in radical times, need a radical solution. Who were you pointing to over here next?
Right here in the gray, right here, the lady in the gray. So the media is not going to help us when it comes to understanding our freedoms and our liberties and uniting with each other. It's not.
Well, how do we circumvent the media? How do we get around that media?
We're doing it right here. We're doing it right here.
Social media,
many others, yeah.
So we've got to get you out there.
Right here. Thank you.
So with the newly added onto the vaccine list for kids, the COVID-19, how are we going to help to fight mandates such as that, or even in the future, the next man-made virus that comes, and healthcare workers are still being mandated to do those things. We're still muzzled every day at work. How can you, and the response that we got before was, well, I even went to numerous of the Republican deals and spoke, and I said, where else do I go? I am a very specific job that you need. Well, it's a right to work. You can go wherever. Take the vaccine or find a new job.
So these mandates coming down from the federal government, and I'm going to be a little more general because we have the COVID mandates, we have red flag laws, we have many other things that we're seeing. I mean, the FBI just raided our former president, his home, and many they just arrested a whole bunch of Christians for peacefully demonstrating near an abortion clinic. This is what happened. This is what's going on. Our policing agencies are being weaponized against the people. And it's very important that we have these checks and balances put in place. And how did the founders say that we were to check the federal government? The states were supposed to do it. And then if the states don't do it, I'm going to read you the Second Amendment, because the Second Amendment is a lot more than what people think it is. It's not just about owning guns and having guns, although it is part of that. But the very first part of it says a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. So it's telling us there that, and the militia is the people, right? So let's not be afraid of that word. That's a scary word, right? It's saying that if the people aren't united and organized in defense, and if they're not armed, that the state can't be free, that they can't be free. Now, I know that's pretty extreme, right? But to answer your question, the state has to begin being that check and balance to the federal government. That's the only thing that's going to keep them under control unless the people flat out just defend themselves. And the reason why the states don't do that, because they're receiving billions of dollars from the federal government, which is a major problem. Idaho, I just showed you, receives almost, over 30 or a third of its revenue comes from the federal government. No. So she asked, would I receive revenue from the federal government? No. We have to get rid of that. We have to diminish that. We have to solve this problem. And then people ask, well, how are you going to do that, How are you going to do that? One, downsizing government. That's going to have to be, we're talking about right here, one agency consuming 40% of the budget. One agency. And I'm going to show you a video on that. But I also want to show you something here that's really impactful. So the red is federally controlled land in Idaho. Okay, can you see that okay over there? The white is private property or state land, endowment land. This is causing major problems. And the number one problem is we can't pay our own bills. We have to go back to the federal government because we can't pay our own bills. I want to show you a few more maps because it's not just in Idaho. It's actually in the western United States. If you look east of the Colorado Rockies, it's only 2.4% federally controlled. West of the Colorado Rockies is 51%. This was constitutionally established and the West wasn't. And the states haven't fought this battle to be free because they become dependent on the federal government. The western states become dependent on the federal government. Now, burn this into your mind because I'm going to show you a few more things, right? Just burn this map into your mind because I want to show you a few more things that might really be telling when it comes to this. And why I'm so adamant about fighting this battle and getting our lands back, right? It's essential for the liberty and future of Idaho that we get our lands back. But I want to show you just kind of a few more things. Remember this, look at the amount of land and all of that the federal government's controlling. And then let's go to a fire history map of the United States. Right? So where is it burning up? Right? What about, so about a month ago, this was a map of where the fires actually were a month ago. Look at Idaho, it's burning up. Right? Well, I don't know if they're doing it on purpose or not. What about the restricted lands? Restricted lands in the United States. Let's go there. That look familiar? Okay, you might be asking, well, why are they doing this? Right? Why are they doing this? Well, let's look at a gold mine map and a mercury map of the United States. Because there's tremendous wealth in the West. Tremendous wealth. What about a uranium map? Concentration. Look at that. What about like geothermal energy map? You can see, if we get our lands back, we get control of them, we control of our mineral rights, we have way more money than the federal government's ever giving us. And we don't have to take it with strings. And the people of Idaho they get to work, they get to produce. Our youth don't have to go to the cities. They can live where their family is, and they can produce, and the economy of Idaho will be just, unbelievable, the potential that we have here. Yet, this is what we're facing right here. It's causing a tremendous amount of problems, and we have to solve this problem, and that's one of the things. Now, because of time, I need to show you this, because I do have a plan. I do have a plan, and I've outlined this plan. This plan is called the Keep Idaho, Idaho plan. And if you go to votebundy.com, you can read it. It's in very much detail. It's taken me 7 years to develop this plan, and I haven't done it alone. And so these are the 8 planks to the Keep Idaho, Idaho plan. And so I'm going to read these to you and talk a little bit about them, and then I want to show you some videos, and then we'll close up here today. Number 1, protect private property. Again, if we don't have our properties that we can control, that we can be safe in, that we can live on and raise our families, we don't really have much. And in fact, Karl Marx, the author of the Communist Manifesto, said that communism can be summed up into one sentence: the abolition of private property. 2, the elimination of progressive taxes. So this would include the elimination of property tax. And what do we do with those needed funds? Well, we're going to replace it with what I believe the only moral way to tax a people, and that is through a consumption tax. And I broke that all down at votebundy.com. Go to my Keep Idaho, Idaho plan of how we're going to do this. 3, what's that? Would you be able to shoot deer on your property? That's a good question. You mean the deer don't belong to the king? Is that what you're saying? I don't know. I'll have to. It sounds like a good idea. So 3, free Idaho from federal control. 4, which kind of ties into this, make Idaho independent again. If you can't pay your own bills, you're not independent. Right? You know that in your own life. We've all been there. You know, where it puts us because we can't pay our own bills is a terrible situation. And Idaho's been in it. Did you know Idaho has not paid its own bills for the last 38 years? 38 years, Idaho has had to go back to the federal government every year to pay its own bills. 5, bring back the rule of law. I wish in one way, I wish I had time to tell you some of the things that have happened to, me and my family and many others. But I think we get it. If you don't have justice, if you don't have the law to protect your rights, your liberties, then you don't have anything. You just don't. And your soul longs for justice. It longs for justice, especially when you're under the circumstance where that's been taken. Yes?
What are you going to do to re-educate the sheriff's police department, constitutional sheriff?
Yeah.
Constitutional police.
Yeah, thank you. Because I just showed you how officers violated the Constitution when they took an oath to it, right, in Idaho. So there needs to be a education. And who is better to do it than a governor? Who's better? They'll listen to them. We have the ability to do that. Also, I've made an oath to the law enforcement in Idaho. To be honest with you, I don't like even calling them law enforcement. That's a terminology that's been created so that that's what we think they're there for. However, it's a terminology that people use, so I'm going to use it to communicate. But my oath to them, to the peace officers of Idaho, is that when they uphold their oath of office and their superiors trying to, discipline them or fire them or whatever, that as governor, I will come to defend them. Amen. And legally, politically, and even physically if we have to. And that way it'll change the culture of the law enforcement, because there's good law enforcement that are in these agencies all over, but they're faced up every day of losing the ability to pay their own mortgage or upholding their oath or being arrested themselves. And knowing that the governor's office and the attorney general's office will have their back when they uphold their oath, is going to be very powerful for them, a very powerful tool. And I think we can change the culture of law enforcement by doing that. So number 6, make Idaho an economic powerhouse. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be. Idaho is full of natural resources, full of people that want to work. We have the possibility of having a seaport in Lewiston, Idaho. We have natural gas all over, water, land, timber. I mean, it's called the Gem State for a reason. They call Treasure Valley a Treasure Valley for a reason. It's not because it's poor. I mean, there's no reason why we can't be an economic powerhouse, and we should. 7, secure the quality of life for every Idaho family. It's the purpose of government, right? To secure that.
So what do we do for seniors and veterans then?
Well, I can tell you right off the bat, eliminating property tax is going to help the seniors. Right? And number 8, make Idaho an example of peace and prosperity to the rest of the world. And we need that. Again, if we're not going to do it, who's going to do it? Who's going to do it?
How do you feel about the greater Idaho moving into, or Oregon moving into the greater Idaho?
I think it's great. I just don't think that that it's going to happen. And you know, basically you got Eastern Oregon that's tired of the tyranny they've been under, and they want to join Idaho. And I don't blame them, but they have to get consent from their legislature. They have to get consent from our legislature, and they have to get consent from U.S. Congress, and that's a pretty tall order, right? So, but I don't blame them for wanting to. So, now, you want to have a little fun? Watch some videos. They're just 1-minute videos. They're what my campaign's been putting out, and anyway, I think they're a lot of fun, and hopefully you'll find. Do you want to hit the lights? Yeah. She's got one more question? Okay. Yeah. One more question right here.
Actually, it's not a question, Governor. It's a comment.
Okay.
Being a native Idahoan, Idahoans and all these Californians moving into our state, we question how are they going to vote for us? Okay, I was in Republican headquarters the other day. There was a gentleman coming in asking for information. He was going to be Republican, and he was going to vote for Bundy. Guess where he was from?
Where?
California.
Yes.
I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. We've been getting a lot of that. And in fact, I will say, in the early stages of our campaign, the best financial support we received was from the move-ins from California. So, thank you. All right, go ahead and shut the lights off. You guys ready for this? Here's a video that we call "What Makes California, California."
What makes California, California? Is it the drugs? Is it the homeless? Is it the crime? Or is it the defecation in the streets?
Well, luckily for us, we don't live in California. We live in Idaho, where crime is stopped out, where men are still men, and where the American dream still lives today. You see, we do things a little different around here, and we're not going to stand by and watch as our way of life gets destroyed. This November, we have one chance to keep Idaho safe from crime, from drugs, and from violence. To keep Idaho free from mandates, from lockdowns, and tyranny. We have a chance to keep our children safe from indoctrination and exploitation. This November, we have one chance to preserve our way of life. I'm Ammon Bundy. Vote for me to keep Idaho, Idaho. All right, here's another one, but I do have to warn you, this is the PG-13 version. I need to download the PG version, so I'm warning you anyway. But it's a very, very important video, and one that really brings to light what is some of the things that are happening here in Idaho. It's titled "Groomers."
Something is happening across America, and it isn't isolated to California, New York, or Washington, D.C. It's in our classrooms. It's in our libraries. It's online. It's in our streets. It's in our parks. And it's happening right here in Idaho. Our children are being groomed. Idaho's governor has not only remained silent, he is actively partnering with the corporations, lobbying groups, and state agencies who have overseen this perverse assault on our children. My name is Ammon Bundy, and when you elect me governor of Idaho, I will protect our children and use all means necessary to keep them safe from this perverse, sexualized ideology. It's time Idaho puts groomers where they belong.
All right. Can we do a couple more? You guys up for a couple more? Okay.
There is a war being waged against the most vulnerable and helpless people in our society, the unborn. With over 75 million abortions in the U.S. alone, abortion has become the largest genocide in human history. But with the overturn of Roe versus Wade, states have been given an opportunity to fight for the lives of the unborn. Brad Little sided with Democrats in Boise, but he refused to fight when he called Idaho's laws on abortion unconstitutional and unwise. I want to be clear. Murdering children is not a choice, it is a crime. And when I am governor, this crime will no longer go unpunished. My name is Ammon Bundy. I will put an end to abortion on day one. A vote for me is a vote to ensure that Idaho's borders are where abortion ends and where life begins.
All right, this one is a little bit Hollywood. So, I'm warning you, it's pretty, yeah, why not though, right? And it was a lot of fun making, but it is a little bit Hollywood, but it also has a pretty good message in it.
If there's anyone out there, if you can hear me, this is a warning.
There's a new threat in this great land, and it's come to Idaho. It can take on many forms and names, but we know it as the cult. With feverish hate, they work to destroy our sacred values, beliefs, and what is most precious to us. There's only one way to fight this evil. Find them and chase them out. For now, they failed, but they're still lurking in the darkness. And this battle has just begun. Join the fight at
All right, how about one more? And then after this, we'll be done. And I want to thank you for your time, for your questions. Thank you for being here, and I hope that we'll continue to move and push liberty. That this body of people will continue to stay together, continue to work together in preserving and taking back this liberty that we've lost and that we're losing. So this video here is called We'll Help Them Move.
Idaho liberals say that if I'm elected as governor, they will leave the state. Well, I'm here to tell you that when I'm elected governor, Idaho will help pay for their moving costs. After all, it's keeping and keeping it here. Idaho spends nearly 40% of our annual budget on welfare programs. That's almost $4 billion of your tax dollars going up in the smoke every year. As governor, we will be getting rid of property tax, income tax, and your grocery tax, and balancing the budget by ending our billion-dollar welfare state. Idaho isn't California, and if liberals have a problem with that, then we'll help them move there. After all, the moving costs will be only a fraction of the price to keep them here. No one is saying you have to leave, but if you're going to stay here, then you have to work like the rest of us.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ammon Bundy. Before you take off, I want to answer a real quick question that came up over here. It's how do we defeat the media? Because it's only the left that gets the media. The governor has, right now, Little has access to the media, but it's hard for these messages to get out. The best thing that you can do in the next couple weeks, and we have less than a couple weeks, is get on his Facebook page, get on his YouTube page, wherever you're at. These ads were on those pages. Share them, share them, share them. Get an Ammon Bundy sign, put it in your yard. We are the media. We can be the part that defeats that media, but we have to come out of the closet. We can't be closet Ammon Bundy supporters. We got to be very active about it. Let everybody know that we're supporters of him. And that's how we get this man elected despite the media. Thanks for coming out, everybody.